Rewritten! Epilogue! Steven was thinking too much. And even though he knew that he was thinking too much, that didn't stop him from thinking anyway. He was a miserable pile of barely contained emotions, curled up on his bed with a pillow over his face, his mind filled to the brim with Connie. Her words echoed through his head, over and over again, like a broken record. Of course I'm not mad. Was she saying it in a sarcastic way? Was she furious that he'd even ask if she was mad? He wished that he could read her emotions better, but every time the sentence replayed in his head, it only seemed to get more jumbled up until it sounded more like she'd yelled it. Of course I'm not mad. Why would I be? All you did was literally kill me. What a question! He had to know if she'd meant it like that. Steven almost called her back, right then and there. The uncertainty was overpowering. But he stopped, the leathery pad of his finger hovering precariously over her name. Something held him back, a piece of twine pulling up on his claw, preventing it from touching down. She'd think that he was an idiot, no matter what the answer was. Connie had more important things to do. What if he was being clingy? What if that was why she was trying to get into college, to get away from him? Connie was smart and resourceful and awesome. She had way better places to go in life than to stay with him and deal with his dramatic corruption scars. He tried to just go to sleep, thinking that he would be exhausted enough to escape into dreamland, even if it had been recently renovated into nightmare land, but he was too anxious to even do that. He kept on tossing and turning restlessly like he was sleeping on an ant pile, trying almost every combination of positioning. Connie was never gonna talk to him again. Connie must be calling her human friends, telling them how weird Steven had been. Connie was probably receiving advice from them, all about how to break up without getting the freaky creep of a half-alien mad. Connie would be missing out on study time, which would get her frustrated at him, wondering why he made her whole life come to a halt with a dumb update about his nose. He didn't want to mess up her future. He'd already done that enough. He had to let her continue on with her life. What was he thinking? She had to study, not waste her time on him. She probably wanted him to back off. He'd refused to the night that he showed up at her doorstep, corrupting. He'd scarred her beyond repair, and it didn't matter how much he wanted to make amends with her. No amount of amends would be able to fix this. He shouldn't call her. Not now and never again. That would make it worse. She probably wanted space. No, not just that. She probably wanted to break up. He knew that he deserved it, but he couldn't help but feel a twist of pain inside of him at that thought. This was just like the night after she rejected his proposal. The déjà vu was blazing in the front of his head. He thought about her answer trillions of years ago. It's not a no, it's a not now, Steven. He'd been worried then about if she'd been lying to spare his feelings, or worse, because she was afraid of his reaction. And now was exactly the same. Connie didn't want to officially break his heart, even though she was chipping away at it slowly anyway. She was probably worried about making his corruption scars worse. But that was wrong, so wrong. He shouldn't trap her with him just because she feels bad for him. That was toxic. Steven bit his fangs together, the pillow gripped tightly in his talons like a stress ball, trembling from the sickening thoughts of what he was doing to her. He was the wrong person for her. He couldn't be with her while he was like this. Steven was a dangerous gem hybrid, son of a literal diamond. If he wanted to, he could murder everyone on the planet. She must think that he's psychotic. Did she feel scared of him? He didn't want her to be scared. He wanted her to be happy as possible for the rest of her life. But if he couldn't make her happy, then what was he here for? Who would want to marry Steven? He's the first hybrid that they know of. They literally have no idea how he's going to grow. They didn't even know, until he was 15 and started getting absolutely torturous growth spurts, if he was going to age past a 9-year-old. Connie frequently talked about wanting to have kids when she gets older. But how could she have kids with him? Who knows how their children would turn out? What if he messes them up? They'd be 1/4 gem, but he wouldn't be capable of giving them even a portion of his gem to them, no matter how much he would want to. So would their bodies be only 3/4 formed without the light energy to make up for the 1/4 part of them that was a jewel? Steven couldn't make her happy at all. He was a risky experiment. She didn't need to have a rogue variable in her life. She would be way happier with another human, so she wouldn't have to worry about what happens next. Humans and gems were never meant to mix. Steven was living proof of that. Connie didn't need Steven. Why was she still around? Because she's scared of what you'll do, he answered himself. He wasn't just bad for her because of his heritage. He was bad for her because he had done something awful to her, and he could never take it back. Steven just wanted Connie to be happy, but if he wasn't capable of that, then what was he going to do? He didn't want her to leave him. That selfish feeling would linger no matter what justifications he thought of. But if it was for the best, then what right does he have to hold her back? Connie would be better off without him. He was hurting her. He needed to let her go. That was the last thought that kept rolling around in his head as he lied there on his bed, still unable to escape the sticking spiderwebs of his thoughts. A pathetic, heartbroken wreck. Those thoughts grew louder and louder, pinning him under their weight, and before he knew it, the flow of tears started again. Steven sobbed hard, unable to help it, squishing the pillow further into his face until he began to get lightheaded, silently praying for the gems to not check on him right now. He was already falling down the hill too fast to stop, so he just let himself keep falling, his quivering body racked with silenced cries. He could faintly hear his gem trying to help, but the pink shine only made him feel worse. Hey, it's okay, Steven, don't cry, his gem attempted. You don't need Connie, she's just a human, she was gonna die of old age anyway. That was not the right thing to say at all. Shut up, he snarled at his gem in his thoughts. Go away, leave me alone! It backed off quickly, not knowing how to help. It wasn't good with emotions and didn't understand why that specific human meant so much to Steven. It could never understand because it didn't have feelings. It just leached off of his own. Steven could recognize the trail his thoughts were taking and tried to stop them. He was supposed to be happy with his gem. He just got the scars to reduce, and he was already feeling horrible again. It was like he was trying to suffer. This was all his fault. He didn't have the strength to focus on forcing away his gem for much longer anyway. Connie took over all of his mind space soon enough, leaving no room for anything else. She hated him. But he still loved her. What was he going to do? It didn't matter if he loved her. He shouldn't put his feelings over hers. It was wrong. He had to say goodbye, so she's free from him for good. Steven promised himself that he would find out how to do that later. Right now, he just wanted to get the hurt part over with. Steven couldn't do it now. He had to sort his thoughts out so they could turn out into orderly words. But that was going to take a while. And then, right in the middle of this breakdown, at possibly the worst time, his phone rang again. The same cheerful tune, electrifying him. He dug himself out of the pillow that he'd been attempting to bury his head under, swiping an arm across his face to try and regain his vision, squinting at the phone with a sense of dread. Connie again. Steven nearly screamed aloud, rubbing his eyes and looking again just to be sure. She was calling him back. Why, he didn't know, but he did know that he had to pick up. Steven glanced over at the empty space on the closet door where his mirror used to be before remembering that he'd broken it. But he didn't need a mirror to know how terrible he looked anyway. He couldn't talk to her, not like this. He had to think of some other way to explain it all, and at the very least stop crying. He had about 10 more seconds to pick up, or she would think that he was ignoring her. Crap, okay, calm down, Steven stammered to himself, trying desperately to climb down out of this, taking in several deep breaths and letting them all out as shakily as they'd entered. He wiped his sleeve across his eyes, knowing that the puffy redness was still giving him away. Hey, Connie, he practiced in the lonely darkness of his room, watching the ringing phone, knowing that he was rapidly running out of time. Hey, Connie, hello, Connie. Stars, his voice was still crackly and watery, sobs kept on trying to poke through the thin paper that he'd covered them up with. He had to pick up, now! Steven braced himself for whatever was to come, and finally answered. Connie, hi! Steven gasped out. Hey, Steven, Connie began, apprehensive again. Just, wanted to check on you again. Are you okay? Her voice, again, was painful to hear. It felt like a hooked line dragging up through his chest, agonizingly slow. Yep, Steven swallowed down a whimper. I'm fine. A pause. Oh no, Connie said. Steven, are you crying? What? No! Crying? Me? Steven hiccuped, not convincing in the slightest. You're hearing things. You're crying, Connie sighed, ashamed. Gosh, I'm sorry, Steven. I didn't mean to leave you hanging up there like that. I couldn't. Connie suddenly huffed in frustration, her next words driven in determination. You know what? I'm coming over. I shouldn't be hiding like this anymore, not from you and not now. What? Steven cracked. But I'm sorry, Steven. I'll clear it all up in a second, Connie told him. Just hang on. And with that, she hung up, leaving him in a state of shock. What? What? What did she want to say? Why did she have to say it to his face? Steven let the phone drop again, despair digging its icy claws into his insides. She was going to break up with him. She just didn't want to do it over the phone. He should be happy. She was going to be free from him. But it didn't matter how much he knew that this moment was coming. It didn't matter how much he knew that he deserved it. That didn't make it hurt any less. Steven couldn't do anything to prepare himself as he waited for her to come. He didn't even know how he could prepare. He had to make this as easy on her as possible. Let her know that he wouldn't stop her from leaving. He found himself holding onto his doorframe for support, standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows of his room, watching, listening, waiting. He couldn't see the front door from here, but he heard whenever she walked up to the porch. His ears pricked up as she knocked, Garnet answering. Hello, Connie. Hi, I'm just here to see Steven. A pause. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Future vision. But whatever Garnet saw, she didn't stop it. She just said, okay, he's up in his room. Thanks. And now, Connie was heading up the stairs, closing in. Steven nearly collapsed, still trying to keep balance against the door, teetering between the safety of his bed and the rapidly approaching footsteps. He didn't have enough time to gather himself better. Steven could only stand there, petrified, as Connie turned the corner to go up the rest of the staircase, stopping abruptly as they made eye contact. He stopped breathing. It felt too risky to. She was bundled in a coat that looked scuffled like she'd thrown it on in a rush, her fluffy black hair in a similar state of uncombed urgency. Her calculating, night-dark eyes pierced through him, reading his mind like a book. He knew that he looked like a wreck, and there was nothing that he could do about it, just as how he couldn't prevent what she was about to tell him. Steven stepped back, his face heating up, biting the inside of his mouth and looking away in shame, unable to stand meeting her gaze anymore. It was like trying to look at the sun. Still, even though it felt like the world would implode if the silence swelled any further, Connie didn't say anything yet, taking the next few steps up the stairs towards him. He began to retreat away like she was repelling him, the matching ends of a magnet. He wobbled unsteadily as he let go of the doorframe in favor of backing up further, only stopping whenever he bumped into his bed. Connie was in his room, only a few feet away, the distance closing. He had to say it first. Stop, Steven suddenly said, holding up his paws. She came to a halt. He had to let her know that he wouldn't react like last time. He had to let her go. Stop, I know what you're gonna say, he rambled, stuttering like a malfunctioning machine. And I just want to tell you that I understand, and I won't get mad, and I'm really, really, really sorry for ruining it like this. His voice choked up, refusing to stay steady, even though he had so many more words to say to her. She still wasn't speaking. It was torture. So his sentence kept on spilling out to try and cushion it, more and more, not knowing how he would ever explain all of this. He tried his hardest not to break down again, knowing that she would just pity him even more, but he was far past the brink of tears already. Connie, you deserve so much better than me, and I'm not just saying all this so you'll feel bad for me. I really mean it. You don't have to forgive me. You shouldn't. Please don't. It's not good for you. So please, just go already. A vast canyon he'd carved now ached between them, deep with darkness and impassable. He didn't dare to look up at her. He didn't move a muscle. But at least she knew that he understood. At least she wouldn't feel the need to lie. She wanted to break up, but was too scared of his reaction. That was the long and short of it. He waited for her, a buzzing swarm in his ears, every second driving the white-hot spear deeper into his chest. Finally, after too long, Connie whispered, I should have done this sooner. Here it was, the end of the world. Steven, I don't want to break up. I wasn't coming here to do that. Alarm impelled him. She was sacrificing herself for him. He couldn't let her do that. He shook his head quickly, insisting, No, 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 don't say that. I know I regret it now, but that doesn't mean that what I did was okay. It was not okay. I hurt you really bad, and you need to get away from me. It's not healthy to just stay because you feel bad for me. It's not your job to make me happy. We're supposed to be happy together, not just you doing all of it. You don't have to be with me anymore. You can go find someone else, someone who's not messed up. Connie's voice raised. Steven, just hush for a second. Why was this so difficult? Why couldn't she just turn and leave? I'm sorry too, okay? She said, firm and bold. I shouldn't have avoided you for this long. We have a lot to figure out about us, but I should have gotten us to figure this out sooner, not just put it off. She put a hand to her face, dragging it down and looking up at him again. He couldn't see what expression she wore, but he didn't dare to peek. Just listen to me for a second. We need to talk about what happened. Actually talk, not just ignore it or dodge it. Talk. Then we can figure out what to do. She gestured to his bed. Let's just sit down, okay? I don't want you to collapse in the middle of this. Steven nodded anxiously, his sore legs and spine grateful as he settled down. Connie sat beside him, not close enough to touch. He was taking one corner and she was on the other, at about an arm's length. He didn't look up at her and she didn't either. It just felt easier that way. She sighed in and out. He had the feeling that she had rehearsed this before as she began with, Look, I haven't been avoiding you because I hate you. I just couldn't stand to face you again, I guess. I know it wasn't really you. Corruption does horrible things to your mind, but it still happened. She exhaled. His eyes stayed on his clawed feet, giving her space to tell him whatever she was planning. Connie kept going. I just wanted some space to think. And it all started with just 3 days of space, and then a week, and then a month. I'm really sorry. I should have texted you at the very least. I was just messed up from it all. I'm still messed up now, but I have to stop avoiding you. That won't make it better. I have to figure this out. She seemed to run out of words. Was he supposed to say something? So, what do you remember? Connie asked him, a needle in the silence. She was glancing up at him. He twitched his head in her direction, then decided on keeping it down. His mind slowly submerged himself in the back of his head, where the memories were the scratchiest. I have remembered almost nothing, he began to explain. It was just one big haze after I saw the scales around my gym. I remember the diamond bottles being empty, escaping out the bathroom window, Bluebird, my dad, running, you answering the door. It just gets foggier the farther I get. His paw drifted down to his middle as he said, The most of it was just a horrible, horrible pain in my gem, worse than anything I'd ever felt before, and just trying not to react as the corruption literally ate me alive right in front of you, hiding it below my shirt where you couldn't see. He blinked back the sharp stinging in his eyes. And then you were dead. And it was because of me, because I didn't hide it well enough and spilled it out onto you. Steven curled his limbs closer to himself, his eyes curling up to look at her. She was watching him, intense and searching. What happened to me? Why did I do that? Steven asked. Do you remember? Did I say anything? Was there even a reason? Or did I just start attacking you? Connie's eyes widened slightly. You don't remember why? She tilted her head. Steven winced. No, it's just pain. Connie leaned back a little, staring up at the ceiling, like she hadn't expected that. Eventually, she reoriented the new part of that story, saying, You came to me for help. You thought I could make the corruption go away, and so you asked for us to fuse. You thought Stefani would help heal you and reverse it. It was like she was clearing the debris away, showing him his own memories again. He almost remembered that. At least, he remembered the feelings of hope and trust that he had come to her with. But I said no. I had to say no, Connie told him, hints of guilt peeking at the edges like scorch marks. I didn't know what would happen to us. No sensible person would think that it's a good idea to fuse with someone while they corrupted, but you weren't a sensible person right then. Her expression became twisted with hurt sympathy, and Steven looked away, knowing what part was next. You were hurting so badly, Steven. It was so awful to watch, and Connie sounded like she was about to break. And you just didn't understand why I said no. All you saw was that I didn't want to help, that I didn't love you enough to even try. She bit back her words, pausing the story with an almost ferocious yelp. I love you, Steven. I love you. I promise. I do. But it was too risky. No, it's okay, Connie. You did the right thing. Steven encouraged her sadly. That was smart. That was so much smarter than what I wanted. Thank you so much for trying to get out of there. But he could see what his past self had thought in the moment. All he had seen was that she was leaving him, like everyone else, and Steven had been determined to stop her from leaving, no matter what it took. She tried to briefly clean herself up, though it didn't do much to help, and echoed, You wouldn't take no for an answer. I could see when you disappeared. It was like a light went out, like the corruption stole you away for good, and her eyes flicked about the room like she was watching the scene all over again. And so I ran. You chased me up the stairs, and I hid inside my room and locked the door. I texted my mom to try and warn her about you, and then I got my sword. He remembered a sword, cast aside after the door was knocked down. He hadn't stopped to think of what it had been for. His heart sank. She'd been so afraid of him that she had grabbed her weapon. She had been prepared to defend herself, to fight him. I'm so sorry, Steven whimpered. I'm so sorry. There was no way to explain it aloud. Connie just nodded and said, I know. I feel just as bad about it. But I knew that I had to make a decision. You were corrupting. I thought I was gonna have to... She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Thank you, Steven said. Thank you. If I was aware, I would have told you to do it, okay? It would have been the right thing. Steven, don't say that. Connie pushed away that topic. We shouldn't think about that. It didn't happen that way anyway. She was right. It didn't. He could feel the broken ends of his memories connecting again, flowing with a new, terrible life. I waited for you to break the door down, Connie went on, her voice crackled with a deep, contorting emotion. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I just had to listen to you as you screamed and cried and begged me to help you, and I knew that when you finally made it through, I wasn't gonna help at all. Anguish twisted in her features, and Connie wiped an arm across her face, trying to keep it together as she croaked, You were in so much pain, Steven, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was just gonna run you through like you were some rabid dog who had to be put down. Steven reached towards her, then stopped whenever she flinched away from him. He wanted to help her stop crying, so he tried to use his words instead. It's okay. You were completely justified. I was gonna attack everyone. You did the right thing. I was a rabid dog. Thank you. I would have wanted it if it meant saving you in Beach City, all right? He could tell that wasn't settling well with Connie. He waited until she calmed down a bit, until she could keep going. And finally, you made it through the door, and... She made a vague hand motion in front of her face. It's all shredded up from there on. I could feel you with me, but it wasn't like Stevani. And I wasn't really feeling a lot of the corruption either. You were blocking as much as you could. It was like you were shielding me with your mind. You were taking the full blast of it. I could tell how much it was hurting you, but you wouldn't let me go. You wouldn't let me share the pain even a little. I only really got to sense flashes of it here and there, and when it was finally over, you were at the surface, and I was watching, totally helpless. I could barely move. I knew you were looking for me, but I couldn't reach you. It was like I was half asleep. The most I remember is trying to stop the bleeding whenever you pulled out your gem." He remembered the smaller Connie arms, pressing his torn jacket up into his belly's gaping wound. He only really processed now that he hadn't been sending the signal to do that. That was her, still trying to help, even if it was subconscious, still trying to save him. "So," she trailed back up to meet him again. "What happened? Do you remember any of it?" Steven nodded slowly. At that point, his memory continued, though it was still broken up at some points. It was like the shock of what he'd done had engraved that moment into his brain, permanently. "I remember coming to my senses when I saw you on the floor," Steven explained, picking up where Connie's story left off. "I tried to heal you, but it obviously didn't work, and then I thought that maybe I could bring you back if we fused. At that point, it wasn't to save me anymore. I wasn't even thinking about that, and I guess the reason I did something so stupid was because I wasn't thinking about it." He found himself lost, staring at his talons, the flickers of white butterflies fluttering right out of his range. "I'm so sorry," Steven said. "I know that does not fix it, not if I said sorry until the end of my life, but I'm sorry. I shouldn't have tried something so reckless. I was just gonna do whatever it took, no matter the consequences. I needed to bring you back, even if it meant being a monster with you." He shook his head, clenching his fangs. "It was so idiotic. I shouldn't have dragged you into the corruption, Connie. You shouldn't have had to go through that with me." Connie thought for a moment, deeply. She eventually said, "But didn't it work?" "What?" He blinked. "It worked, eventually," Connie said. "I'm alive now, aren't I? It's kind of good that you fused with me, even if I had to corrupt. It saved me in the end, in a way." He hadn't thought of it that way. But that didn't really mean that it made up for it. "I'm still sorry. I wouldn't have had to save you if I just told the gems what was happening," Steven said lowly. "Steven," Connie tried, but he cut her off with, "No, please, just take the sorry, okay? I'm not apologizing so you can say that it's fine. I'm apologizing so you know that I mean it." Connie still looked strange. She still didn't look like she understood the extent of what he did. She looked like she still wanted to stay with him. Was it because of pity? Was he tricking her into this? Steven knew that he had to say more. He had to let her understand. He had to ensure that this was out of her own free will, not something that he was dragging her into. He turned himself around to face her and told her seriously, "Listen, Connie, what I did was not okay. I'm not saying this out of some self-hate spiral. It's the truth. I hurt you really bad, and that's just not excusable for any reason." Connie opened her mouth, arguing quietly. "But, Steven, you were corrupting. You didn't know what was happening, and it wasn't just you being psychotic or something. You literally, physically could not understand what you were doing. We haven't blamed any other corrupted gems for what they did. It's not fair to blame you. Anybody would do what you did if they were in enough pain." Steven shook his head and said, "Well, you're right about that part. I swear I didn't mean to do it. I wouldn't have even considered it if I was aware. But I'm not talking about deciding to blame me for it or not. I'm talking about how it affected you." He rubbed his scaled arms, the heavy concern like lead in his heart. "Even if I wasn't aware, I still hurt you, and you're allowed to tell me that you're hurt. Just 'cause I say sorry doesn't make everything fine again. It really doesn't. Trust me, I know. White Diamond said sorry, and I'm still scarred for life. And you don't have to try and make it fine either," he continued before she said anything. "It's not your responsibility to forgive me out of true love or some other cliche crap. I want you to do whatever is best for you. I want you to be happy, whether that involves me or not. If you're too scared to be with me anymore, that's okay. I promise I'll be fine, as long as I know you're not forced to be fine with me." Connie gazed at him, her night eyes gleaming of tiny pricks of teary stars. And then she slowly nodded, looking away again, processing all of that carefully, picking through it. He gave her all the time she needed. Connie said slowly, like she was thinking aloud, I want to be with you. I want to be a part of your universe. You're still Steven, even if you corrupted. I want Steven back as much as you do, but... She tried to lean towards him, but a shivering fear stopped her. He hated the fact that he was causing the fear. He wanted to stomp it out somehow, but there was no way to help but to do nothing. Connie drew back again, arms folded across each other like she was cold. But I don't know how things can be normal again. Steven sighed, the regret a powerful pulsing in his throat. I'm so sorry all this happened. I wish things could just go back to what they were like a month ago. I wish I never messed it up. Connie started before shaking her head. Well, it's not okay, but I want it to be okay. It'll be okay eventually, but I think we just need to take a break from each other. Not forever, but just until you're better, until I'm better, until Stevani is better, until everything is better. It seemed like the best idea for now. Steven nodded sullenly. That sounds good. Just for some space, you know? Connie said hopefully. Space, Steven agreed. The room emptied of all sounds. He didn't know if it was a tense silence or a satisfied one. It was kind of both. He was still worried for her. In any other situation, this would be a horrible decision for her. But this was a very specific series of events, one where he wasn't in control of his actions at all. He'd hurt her, not on purpose, but it's not like that makes her not be hurt anymore. If Steven had done it on purpose, she should have left. But he didn't, and she still wanted to stay with him. They just needed to heal a little bit more before going back to normal again. Are you sure this is okay? Steven asked quietly. Connie nodded again. Yeah, I just need some time to recover, okay? Then maybe we can be happy together again. I started going to therapy again, so that'll help. Steven couldn't stop a gasp. Therapy? Connie had to go to therapy because of him. It made sense, obviously. Who wouldn't need therapy after all that? But he hadn't really put the puzzle pieces together until now. Connie seemed to sense his wave of guilt because she quickly said, I've been going to him before, whenever we were younger and we fought for the crystal gems. It's okay. I honestly should have asked you if you needed therapy too back then. I can't believe I didn't after hearing about you going through 10 times more than me, but that's off topic. Just please don't think too much about it. It's all taken care of, much more than yours was. Not thinking too much about it was impossible. But he tried to just be glad that she was getting help. And according to what she'd said, she had gotten help before, too. Maybe that was why she didn't turn out as bad as him, because she had a doctor for a mother and wouldn't have tried to suppress it all like he did. He was relieved at that. He didn't want her to repeat his mistakes. The two of them sat at the opposite corners of his bed, still and mute. Eventually, Connie stood up, turning towards him. He glanced up, sensing the tired reluctantness that was cobwebbed between them, wishing that things were better. But they weren't. They could wait until they were, but right now, they weren't. Steven told her, fearing that she would disappear before he could convince himself to say something. I'm so sorry about all this. If I knew what I was going to end up doing to you, I would have saved you the time and never bothered you on the beach the day that we met. Connie shook her head, saying, Don't say that. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought real life into my life. She tilted into an almost chuckle and pointed out, Besides, if you never bothered me, I'd be squashed by a rock, right? Steven straightened up, remembering how he'd saved her right after trying to impress her. He sighed and said instead, Look, I love you, Connie, and I hate that I caused all this. I wish things weren't like this. I wish I made better decisions, then maybe things would be better. Connie fidgeted with the edges of her coat, but nodded remorsefully. It's okay. It'll be okay, somewhere in the future. I love you too. She twitched forward, hesitated, and then leaned down, kissing him quickly. A stirred fluttering of relieved emotion swept through him like autumn leaves being scattered in the wind, until she leaned back again, her smile warm and full of longing. Steven watched as Connie backed away and left his room.